In today's video, I am showing off how I made a poker game in C++ and OpenGL called Fight Poker. It's a 1v1 poker game where you play offensive and defensive hands to score points against your opponent. The first thing I did was to create a window, and then add a card which follows the cursor. The card is made up of two triangles, and a model map 4 translates it to the position of the mouse. The next thing I did was render all 52 cards in one draw call. I did this by setting up an instance VBO and then calling GL draw elements instance once, and this draws all 52 cards. But the way I was instancing the cards meant I could only control their positions, which wouldn't work for the full game. However, the first change I made didn't go super well. But then I tried again and changed it to instance based off of map 4s, which allowed much more control, such as the rotations you see on screen here. It was working now, which is great. So to use the system, I created a bunch of vectors that hold lists of cards. Each one represents a place on the board, so one being your hand, one being your attack and defense spot, and then one being the river in the center. And each of these would hold a list of cards. And you could dynamically add or remove cards from the list. And each time you would do this, it would update the instancing VBO, and this would be the base of the game, as now we could add and remove cards dynamically from the board. So once it's in code, it looks like this on screen. As you can see, cards can be added, and it updates the VBO, so it looks like cards are just being drawn to the scene, while keeping it optimized with one draw call. Also during this time, I added a background, which is just another two triangles. It just renders before everything else, and it's that table you see there. And I also added the vectors for the enemy hand and the enemy two positions, even though at the current time you can't place any cards on them. Which is the next thing I end up adding, is placing cards on the opponent's side. But to make this more of a game and less of a tech demo, I add the ability to drag cards from your hand to your attack or defend. This works by recalculating the map 4s that draw the hands, and then it takes those values and multiplies them by two vectors, a bottom left and a top right vector. Then these vectors are compared to your cursor's position, and if it is between them, so that means you're hovering on a card, the card is removed. And then once you release the mouse after clicking, it checks whether you're hovering over one of your two tiles. If so, it places it there, otherwise it just puts it back in your hand. However, this doesn't look great, as once the card is clicked from your hand, it just disappears from the screen until you put it on one of the two spots. So that is what I fixed next. So once you select a card and remove it from your hand, I use the old code from the very beginning of video and draw a second card on top of the screen that has the same suit and rank as the card you removed. And that will follow your cursor around, and it changes in size once you're over your attack spot or your defense spot to indicate that you can place it there. And then once you let go, it stops rendering on your cursor and will go to the designated spot. Now there was one more visual item we needed to add to this before we could start making the gameplay, and that was a scorekeeper. So in the corner, the bottom left and the top right, there are two numbers. The one in the bottom left represents your score as the player, and you increase this whenever your attack hand beats the opponent's defend hand. And the same thing applies for the enemy. Whenever their attack hand beats your defend hand, they score a point. But right now, the scorekeeper isn't updated because we're missing two things. The first thing we're missing is a structured turn. So that is what I work on next. So the way it works is there's a setup phase where the initial cards are dealt, and then it goes in a cycle from turn start, player turn, enemy turn, attack, enemy turn, player turn, attack, and then it repeats that cycle. So during your turn, you can play cards, and during the enemy turn, the AI will play cards for it. And then in the attack phase, which hasn't been coded yet, that's when the points will be determined. So now with that working, I had a few more touch-ups, and then I finished the game by completing combat. So the first one you saw there was all the text on the screen. There's text type enter to start, and there was your turn as a pop-up. So on our turn, we can play our cards like normal, but once we play our last card or we push enter, it will go to the enemy. And the enemy's cards are played face down until the attack phase, and then everything is revealed. And as you can see in the attack phase, the enemy scored a point because their offense beat my defense. And then I'll play my cards, and they play theirs, and it will flip-flop who goes first after each attack. So sometimes you'll be able to see what cards they placed where, and sometimes you won't. And here we have an attack. So I have an ace high card, which beats their king high card, so I score a point. And their high card of 6 beats my high card of 3. And if you notice there, or you'll see next time, is whatever hand is winning is colored in blue, and whatever hand lost is red. So you'll be able to quickly tell if you won or lost, and then the hand will tell you what hand it was. So like we have a pair and a flush, and both of those beat their high cards, so we got a point there and we stopped them from scoring. And this will continue until there's 5 cards in the center, and then that will be the last round, and bonus points will be scored, so it's 2 points instead of 1 in the last round. And then from there, if it's tied, it will keep playing until someone eventually wins. Alright, so there's our attack. So we have a 2 pair and a flush, which does beat their, because they have a king flush, we have an ace flush. So each hand scores better, so a flush will always beat anything lower than it. But then in tied situations, it will check which card is better. And if they're exactly the same, like if it was 2 flushes of kings, then the defender just always wins. And let's see, we got a full house and a flush here. And that was the last round, so we scored double. And then we'll see, it says you won, because we had more points. If the enemy had more points, it would say they won. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and click here if you wanted to see me explain why I switched to this idea from my original. And until next time, see ya.